Ukraine says it is still advancing in the Kursk region of Russia 10 days after launching its cross-border offensive. The Ukraine Armed Forces chief claims his forces advanced between 1 to 3 kilometers on Friday. Kyiv has released video it says shows the initial assault on the Sudzka border crossing to Russia on August 6th. The drone footage shows a tank firing at the border post. It also shows what are said to be Russian soldiers surrendering. Since then, Ukraine says it has seized more than 1,100 square kilometers of Russian territory and captured more than 80 settlements. Well, the incursion caught Russia off guard. Tens of thousands of people fled ahead of advancing Ukrainian troops. Now Ukraine is claiming full control of the border town of Sudzka. And it says it has set up humanitarian corridors allowing civilians to leave. Our correspondent Nick Connolly has met a mother and son in the Ukrainian town of Sumy.
It's like there's a swarm of bees above your head everywhere you go. Drones are everywhere in Sudzka. You can't even go out into your garden or walk down to the river. Our house is almost in the center of town. All the taller buildings in town, anything higher than 2 floors, they're all in ruins.
When Ukraine's army marched into Russia's Kursk region, Oleg was away on business in Moscow. His 88-year-old mother, Galina, was left back alone in Sudzka.
I was in the basement. It was dark all the time. I would light a candle to see what I was eating, but otherwise I was in the dark.
Oleg tried to make his way back to Sudzka, but by the time he got there, Russian troops had already retreated from the town.
The road was already mined. On the edge of Sudzka, a drone hit my car. That's how I hurt my arm. I was concussed. I managed to get home on burst tires. I spent the next week in the cellar with my mother.
Oleg says Sudzka's Russian authorities did nothing to help locals leave.
The local officials just got themselves and their families out. There was no organized evacuation. People tried to get out on their own but failed. There were burnt-out cars everywhere.
Oleg was sure that getting across the front lines to Russian-held territory was simply too dangerous. He and his mother have an advantage over many others trying to get out of Sudzka. They have somewhere else to go and a second passport. Oleg and his mother have joint American and Russian citizenship after living in the US in the 1990s. As Ukrainian soldiers became a more familiar sight on the streets of Sudzka, it turned out that leaving would be easier and faster than they could have imagined.
I saw some Ukrainian military vehicles stop outside. I shouted to them out of the window and told them not to shoot. They told me I could come out and talk to them. I told them I wanted to evacuate my mother. 15 minutes later, they came back, put us in a car, and drove us to Sumy.
It's been just over a day now since mother and son got to Ukraine. Time to get medical help and to take stock.
I'm exhausted. I've lost track of time. I can't even remember what month it is. I remember the Second World War, the sirens, the air raid warnings, running for cover. And now this.
Theirs is certainly an unusual story, but they're unlikely to be the last Russian refugees heading for Ukraine. As fighting in the Kursk region drags on, many Russian civilians might soon have to choose between taking a chance on crossing the front lines and taking a chance on Ukraine.
Yavheniia Kravchuk is a member of the Ukrainian parliament and speaks for President Zelensky's Servant of the People Party. A warm welcome to the day. Ukrainian forces have been pushing into the Kursk region, into Russian territory, on Russian soil. What is being done there to avoid harm to civilians?
Thank you, Claire, for having me. Well, first of all, we need to understand where this region is, and it borders with our region, Sumy. And we had information that Russians were going to attack from Kursk region, Sumy region. So basically, the operation of our army made possible to keep our territory intact. So this is part of self-defense. About the civilian population, we are ready to open humanitarian corridors for both those who want to evacuate to Russian territory, but also will give the possibility to seek shelter in Sumy region on the Ukrainian territory. Some people from Kursk have relatives in Sumy region. I already know personally some cases that, especially older people, they decided to go to Ukrainian territory because they are from this territory, originally were born on this territory. Nevertheless, we have a commander on this territory, so we do not have any civilian authorities on this territory. So it's only military presence because we have military purposes in Kursk.
So sorry to jump in and cut you off, but just to be clear, we're talking about humanitarian corridors that would go both to the Sumy region and also back into Russia. Is there already a sense of timeline here of when this would become possible?
We cannot say anything for Russian side because it depends on them whether they, want to have this corridor or not. But some people already escaped to Ukrainian territory. So it's basically we have the hotline, we have the number that was published by our authorities on which Russian citizens can call and ask for this corridor. But also we have to understand that Ukrainian soldiers on these territories, they obey international humanitarian law. So all people, civilians, of course, they have access to stores. Stores are working there. So it's of course Russian propaganda would like to picture some horrible sights, but they cannot make up. So we have some information that they could actually use the false flag operation to picturize Ukrainian soldiers that that they're doing something harmful. But all of the videos that are circling in social media, we just normal talking. By the way, a lot of people in Kursk region, they actually know Ukrainian because they border with Ukraine. They have relatives in Ukraine and everything.
Okay, let's turn now to the Kursk offensive and how this has changed things. Ukraine has been continuously losing small amounts of territory in the east throughout this year. Do you think that this offensive will have made a big difference to the course of the war?
Well, first of all, Ukraine gained in Kursk region more territory than Russia occupied during the 2024 in total. So it's quite significant. Of course, we do not need this territory for our country. It's just part of our military operation to make sure that our regions will not be shelled from Kursk region, because just from the beginning of this summer, they shelled Sumy region, our territory, more than 2,000 times with artillery, with different howitzers. They sent more than 200 bombs and more than 100 missiles. Now we're pushing, basically, all of their military capabilities so they cannot reach our territory. And another thing about which President Zelensky mentioned both today and previous times, of course, there are some prisoners of war from Russia. They do not want to die and they just surrender. And of course, they will be treated well, given medicine, food and everything. And we hope to exchange them for our prisoners of war that are being tortured in Russia for many, many months.
So it's partly defensive, you say, and also partly to take control of these prisoners of war. We also heard today President Zelensky's aide saying that the Kursk operation could force Russia to negotiate. What do you think he meant there?
Well, also, I think it's a great booster for morale. Turning the whole situation to something that you would never imagine. Just imagine this in 2020, like 5 years ago or something, or 4 years ago, even a year ago. But also, as I understood the Podolyak statement, it shows that Ukraine, if it comes to the table of negotiations, should have a strong position on military battlefield. And part of this strong position could be these territories that we do not need for ourselves, but it's part of control by Ukrainian army. So it could be part of negotiations, but honestly, I don't see yet the sides from Russian side for negotiation that is based on common sense and international-based order.
So just to be clear, does that mean then that Ukraine intends to hold this territory in Russia that it has captured?
Well, that is the question to the military command. As I understand from the information that is public, every day we gain even more territories in Kursk region. And so far, yes, Ukrainian militaries are present on this territory, making sure that these territories are not used to shell Ukraine.
And what message do you think the Kursk offensive sends to Ukraine's backers about military aid?
Well, first of all, it's another thing that we say that we need permission to use long-range missiles to reach not just territories that are close to Ukrainian border, but also, for example, to reach airports, other military parts that are used for shelling Ukraine with missiles. So we need permission for long-range missiles, because right now we're quite successful in reaching airports with our own made drones. Those airports are hundreds and hundreds of kilometers from Russian border, but we could be more effective if we could use the long range.
Yavheniia Kravchuk from President Zelensky's Servant of the People Party. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me.